Hi there, my name is Dan Malleck. I'm the author of Liquor and the Liberal State, Drink in Order Before Prohibition, with this fine picture of a bunch of people drinking orderly before Prohibition. Let me tell you a little bit about this book. What can I tell you? Well, it was an accidental book. I didn't intend to write it when I first started looking into this. I had been invited to a conference in the United Kingdom I think it was called the Victorian Pub. And I thought, well, what was the Victorian pub like in Ontario? I have looked at post-Prohibition drinking, but I hadn't dug too much into what happened before Prohibition. And so I did this little paper just following the laws from Confederation to the First World War when Prohibition was enacted. And I sort of showed how the nature of the pub, the nature of public drinking was slowly constrained, and I called the paper the half-life of the Victorian saloon. But the laws don't, like reading the laws doesn't tell everything, because as you may know, a law is kind of the end point of a social, legal, cultural process and the beginning of a new process. So right, all these things happen, and then governments pass laws in response or in anticipation, and then after that, in response to the laws, some clever lawyers try to work their way around it, or the government sees how the law is implemented and changes need to happen, and so on and so forth. And this is what we see over that 67 to 1916, right? 50 years roughly of change. But I wanted to know how the creation of new laws over time, especially a change in the sort of structure of the law in 1876, created a new administration, and what that then led to, right? So what were the possibilities and what were the outcomes, right? So what were the different things that the government considered doing, and what did they actually do, and how did people react to that? And that got me deeper into administrative history of liquor licensing, sort of the development of this nascent bureaucracy, liquor control bureaucracy, and then deep into the weeds of temperance rhetoric, the opposition to new licensing, and the support of prohibition, and the liquor industry resisting that, and a lot of moderates saying, we don't need laws this intense, this is overreach, and government shouldn't be taking control over the provincial government shouldn't be taking control over this should be a municipal thing, and all sorts of intricate sort of different relationships, legal relationships and cultural relationships and things like that. And then also, what I learned very quickly is that there's a unique nature of our Constitution. It may not be all that unique in a federal system, but in our Constitution, provinces are given the authority specifically over licensing taverns and billiard halls and other such places for the sake of revenue generation. But the federal government, or the Dominion government's job, included authority over trade and commerce. And of course, if you sell liquor, that's commerce, but it's licensed by the provincial government, or is it? And where do those responsibilities, where are they limited? And this led to a lot of court cases that went to the level of the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in London, the final judicial body in our Constitution. Often the decisions were not as people would expect. And so liquor, as much as it was it flowed through the culture of Ontario, and it really sort of inflamed lots of debate and lots of activity, it also was a major contributor to the constitutional distinctions that now, the legal decisions about constitutional distinctions within our Confederation. So for example, in the first case heard by the Supreme Court when it was created in the 1870s was actually about brewers' licenses. And by the 1890s, a major case that went all the way to the Judicial Committee, some have argued, inverted the intentions of the people who wrote the British North America Act. right? They inverted sort of the power of the provinces over licensing and things like that. And I get into it in the book, so I'm not going to get into it here. But to me, it became this fascinating story about the way liquor not only shaped the Canadian state, but also influenced ideas about how the state should operate. And the liberal state part of this was also sort of accidental. As I was reading through all of these debates and discussions and letters and the rhetoric of the temperance organizations and the liquor, the leaders in the liquor industry, and letters to the prime minister, and all of these different documents, I realized that what they were all arguing about was different notions about what liberalism meant, what freedom meant. You know, the temperance movement, you know, sort of notoriously talks about enslavement to liquor and bondage to king alcohol, and how that sort of undermines the authority or the integrity of the people and of the nation. And the liquor industry would rest on classic liberal ideas of individualism, of freedom of trade, freedom of industry. And then a lot of moderates also saw that this attempts for prohibition or over control of liquor was kind of overreach. And so I get really into this notion of what the liberal state meant to these different people, and how the liquor debates helped to shape or draw out ideas of what the liberal state meant and how it manifested itself. Yeah, so that was sort of the exciting stuff that I did. It's a pretty big book. It turned out a lot thicker than I expected, and it took a lot longer than I expected because I kept coming across new commission reports and committee reports and government documents exposing more aspects of liquor in the state and how it functioned, and the relationship between the provincial government and municipalities and different municipalities and municipal agencies, and it was a really complex story that it took a while to sort of structure, but I think it's pretty good, and I hope you like it. And I certainly think that we can joke about, and I joke a lot about liquor history, but not joke as in being disparaging, but as in it can be a lot of fun. But it's also, I think, really pivotal to understanding the nature of the Canadian state is the way that the different government agencies and the people sort of wrestled with this idea of what is the relationship between governments and the people, and what is the government's responsibility for managing the affairs of the people. And I think that those sorts of arguments persist today. And so this can really be helpful, I think, in sort of structuring or guiding some of our understandings about those early debates. Hope you enjoy it. I certainly enjoyed writing it, and that's it for me.